Imagine this. The deadliest war in human history, up to 85 million lives lost, doesn't actually start when your history book says it does. Not in 1939, not with tanks rolling into Poland, but with a pen in a hall of mirrors in 1919. So here's the uncomfortable question. What if World War II was not a sudden explosion, but a slow-motion train wreck that the world watched, argued about, and then quietly ignored for 21 years? Tonight, we're not asking who started World War II. We're asking, when did it actually begin? 1918? 1919? 1931? 1936? Or even earlier? Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll be able to look at any interwar event and say, yep, that's another brick in the road to 1939. All right, let's go back to the moment everyone thought the nightmare was over. Segment 1, the peace that felt like war. We're in November 1918. The guns fall silent. The war to end all wars is over. People flood the streets across Europe, crying, singing, hugging strangers. It feels like the story should end here, but it doesn't. Because the way you end a war often decides when the next one begins. Fast send a few months to the Treaty of Versailles, signed June 28, 1919 in the Palace of Versailles. On paper, it's a peace settlement. In practice, for millions of Germans, it feels like punishment. Under the treaty, Germany has to give up territory to countries like Belgium, France, Poland, and the new Czechoslovakia, lose all overseas colonies, slash its army to 100,000 men, and give up its air force. Accept the war guilt clause, taking responsibility for the conflict. Pay huge reparations, enormous sums of money to compensate the Allies. Imagine being an ordinary German veteran, coming home after years in the trenches. You've survived gas, artillery, and starvation. Your empire has collapsed, your Kaiser is gone, and now you're told, by the way, it was all your fault. You're broke, and you're not allowed to defend yourself properly anymore. Even many people outside Germany worried this treaty was dangerous. Economists like John Maynard Keynes argued it was too harsh and could destabilize Europe. Here's the key idea. Versailles didn't just end World War I, it created a story of humiliation, injustice, and betrayal. And angry people cling very tightly to stories like that. But anger alone doesn't start a world war. For that, you need timing, chaos, and a global crisis big enough to make extremists look reasonable. Segment 2, the world goes broke. Let's jump ahead for a decade. The 1920s look, on the surface, like Europe is healing. You've got jazz, cinemas, experiments with democracy, tries at cooperation like the League of Nations trying to keep peace. It's fragile, but it's something. Then, 1929. The Wall Street stock market crashes. What starts in the United States becomes a global economic earthquake. Trade collapses, banks fail, millions lose their jobs. Now, here's where it gets dangerous. When people are hungry and unemployed, they don't just lose money. They lose patience, hope, and trust in normal politics. Across Europe, extreme movements begin to rise. In Italy, Benito Mussolini had already built a fascist dictatorship by 1922. In Germany, the Nazis go from a fringe movement to a serious political force. In Japan, hardline militarists push for territorial expansion as a solution to economic crisis. Historians broadly agree on this. The Great Depression supercharged fascism and militarism in Germany, Italy, and Japan. And here's the tragic twist. While these regimes promise stability and national pride, their real plan is we'll fix our crisis by taking what belongs to someone else. Living space, colonies, raw materials, neighbors' territory. We're still not at 1939, but you can feel the temperature rising. Segment 3, Japan lights a fuse in Asia, 1931. Most school lessons on World War II started in Europe, but if you ask many historians in China, the war really begins in 1931, not 1939. Here's why. On the night of September 18, 1931, Japanese officers stage what becomes known as the Mukden Incident, a small explosion on a railway line in Manchuria, a region of northeastern China. It barely damages the track, but that isn't the point. It's a pretext. Within hours, Japanese troops pour into Manchuria. By early 1932, they've seized the region and set up a puppet state called Manchukuo, ruled in name by the last Qing emperor, Puyi, but controlled entirely by Japan. Why does this matter for World War II? Because the world's main peacekeeper, the League of Nations, basically shrugs. The League condemns Japan on paper, but there are no serious sanctions, no collective military response. Japan's conclusion? We can invade another country and nothing really happens. And the rest of the world is watching. Germany is watching. Italy is watching. Every aggressive regime is quietly taking notes. Lesson 1. The world talks big about peace, but it doesn't actually stop you. We've now got one front of the future world war opening in Asia, but Europe is about to catch up. Segment 4. Hitler turns resentment into a roadmap. Back in Germany, the Nazis have a very simple, emotionally powerful promise. We will tear up Versailles. We will restore your pride. We will make Germany great again. The trauma of defeat, the humiliation of Versailles, and the pain of the Great Depression all blend into one powerful story. By 1933, Adolf Hitler is chancellor. Soon after, democracy is dismantled. Germany becomes a dictatorship. And then comes the truly dangerous part, foreign policy. Hitler's goals are not a secret. He wants to destroy the Versailles settlement, to unite all German-speaking people, and to conquer living space in Eastern Europe. Step by step, he evaluates how much he can get away with. In 1933, Germany quits the League of Nations and the Disarmament Conference. In 1935, Hitler openly announces rearmament and reintroduces conscription, building an army far beyond the treaty limits. And in 1936, he sends troops into the Rhineland, a demilitarized zone that Germany had promised to keep free of soldiers. If France had reacted militarily, German officers later admitted they would have had to retreat. But France and Britain do nothing. Again, the lesson is clear. When we break the rules, they complain, but they don't stop us. Every successful gambling makes the next, bigger gambling more tempting. But Hitler isn't the only one evaluating the system. Segment 5. Italy, Ethiopia, and the unraveling of peace. Meanwhile, in Africa, another fuse is burning. In 1935, Benito Mussolini's Italy invades Abyssinia, modern Ethiopia, one of the few independent African countries left. It's a brutal war, poison gas, massacres, and a clear act of aggression. The League of Nations again tries to act. It condemns Italy. It imposes some sanctions. But crucially, it avoids banning oil exports, which would actually hurt Italy. Britain and France are more worried about keeping Mussolini as a potential ally against Hitler than about defending Ethiopia. Result? The sanctions are half-hearted. Italy wins, and the League is exposed as toothless. For dictators, this is like a green light. You can invade other countries, and the so-called international community will fumble, hesitate, and look the other way. By the late 1930s, fascist regimes in Italy, Germany, and Japan are not random accidents. They are systematic responses to economic crisis, national humiliation, and a broken international order. The question is no longer, will there be another war? It's, where will it explode first, and who will light the final match? Segment 6. The Spanish Civil War, Rehearsal for Armageddon. If you want to see World War II before it officially begins, look at Spain in 1936. A democratically elected government is challenged by a right-wing military uprising led by General Francisco Franco. A brutal civil war erupts. Why does this matter for our story? Because Spain becomes a testing ground. Hitler and Mussolini send troops, planes, and weapons to support Franco. The Soviet Union supports the Republican side. Bombing raids on cities like Guernica become horrific experiments in terror from the air. Once again, the League of Nations does not stop the conflict. The Western democracies stick to non-intervention while the fascist powers do the opposite. By 1939, Franco wins. Fascism has defeated democracy in Spain. Militarily, Germany has gained combat experience for its pilots and tanks, data on how effective bombing civilians can be. Politically, Hitler has gained something even more important: confidence. The world has watched Germany intervene in Spain, rearm, remilitarize the Rhineland, rip up Versailles, and still no one has forced him to stop. At this point, you could argue that the road to war is no longer being built. It's ready to drive on. Segment 7. Anschluss, Munich, and the last line of defense. Now we're right on the edge. 1938. Germany moves to absorb Austria in the Anschluss Union in March 1938. German troops roll in, many Austrians cheer, the outside world does nothing. Next target, Czechoslovakia, specifically the Sudetenland, a region with a large ethnic German population. Hitler demands it, claiming he's just protecting Germans. This leads to the Munich Conference in September 1938. Britain, France, Italy, and Germany meet. Czechoslovakia is not even invited. The result? The Munich Agreement, which allows Germany to annex the Sudetenland in exchange for Hitler's promise that he has no more territorial ambitions. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain returns home saying he's secured peace for our time. Winston Churchill, not yet Prime Minister, isn't convinced. He warns that this is an illusion, that appeasing Hitler will only make him stronger. Who turns out to be right? Within months, in March 1939, Hitler tears up the Munich deal and occupies the rest of Czechoslovakia. No protection of Germans this time. No excuses. Just open conquest. If you're looking for a moment when people realized, okay, this is heading for a major war, March 1939 is a strong candidate. But remember our original question. What really started World War II? Was it this betrayal? The earlier Anschluss? The Rhineland in 1936? Japan and Manchuria in 1931, the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. Let's zoom out and put the pieces together. Segment 8. So, when did World War II actually begin? If we define the start of World War II as the first time a country crossed the border and the conflict became officially global, then yes. 1 September 1939, Germany invades Poland. Britain and France declare war on Germany 2 days later. That's the textbook answer. But if we define the start as the moment the world order began to break in a way that made a second global conflict almost inevitable, historians point to a chain of causes. 1. The Treaty of Versailles 1919, which left Germany resentful, economically strained, and humiliated, creating fertile ground for radical movements like Nazism. 2. The global economic crisis of 1929 to 1930s, which fueled the rise of fascist and militarist regimes in Germany, Italy, and Japan, all promising recovery through expansion. 3. The failures of the League of Nations in Manchuria 1931, Abyssinia 1935, and Spain 1936 to 39, proving that aggressive states could violate international law with minimal consequences. 4. Step-by-step Nazi expansion, rearmament, the Rhineland, Anschluss, Munich, and the destruction of Czechoslovakia, each gamble rewarded by foreign inaction and appeasement. 5. Japanese expansion in Asia, from Manchuria in 1931 to full-scale war in China in 1937, laying the Asian foundations of the wider conflict. So, what really started World War II? Not a single decision, not a single man, not a single day. It was a slow collapse of trust in democracy, of faith in cooperation, of the courage to confront aggression early while it was still small. And here's the darkest lesson. World War II began the moment the world decided that keeping the peace today was worth any price, including a much bigger war tomorrow. Conclusion: why this still matters. Let's fast forward back to the present for a second. We often imagine history as clear chapters. World War I, 1914 to 1918. Interwar, 1918 to 1939. World War II, 1939 to 1945. But in reality, the years 1918 to 1939 weren't a break between wars. They were the bridge. A bridge built out of bad peace, economic desperation, political extremism, and the long series of moments where leaders said, "This isn't worth fighting over, yet." The reason this question, what really started World War II, still matters is because similar patterns don't announce themselves with sirens, they creep. A treaty that feels unfair but necessary, a crisis that makes extreme voices sound attractive, small acts of aggression go unpunished, the slow erosion of international rules because enforcing them is too expensive or too risky. By the time the tanks cross the border, the story is already almost finished. So, the next time you see a headline about a treaty, a faraway invasion, or a global economic shock, remember, wars don't just start when someone fires the first shot. They start when we decide which injustices we're willing to live with and which ones we're not. If this deep dive into 1918 to 1939 helped you see World War II and maybe our own world a little differently, let me know in the comments. In your view, what was the real point of no return before 1939? Versailles? Manchuria? The Rhineland? Munich? Drop your answer below. I read everything. And if you want more long-form, story-driven history breakdowns like this, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and share this video with someone who still thinks World War II just started in 1939. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.